got to be kidding me. That was President Trump's reaction and response when he spoke with CNN and was asked about these newly uncovered photos and video, offering a new look at his past ties to Jeffrey Epstein. We're going to show you some of them. A photo from 1993 showing Epstein at Trump's wedding to Marla Maples. Epstein's attendance at the wedding has not been widely known until now. Another photo, this one from 1993, also shows Trump with his children next to Jeffrey Epstein at a restaurant opening. And CNN's K-File also uncovered this video showing Trump and Epstein in 1999 at a Victoria's Secret fashion show. All of these, given the dates, taken long before Jeffrey Epstein was ever accused of sexual abuse. President Trump has never been accused of any wrongdoing linked to Jeffrey Epstein. Still, he continues and is taking distract and deflect to a new level. Today, lawmakers are going to be heading home for recess, and that is despite the last-minute push that has been coming from lawmakers on both sides of the aisle to force a release of more information regarding Jeffrey Epstein and the government's investigation. CNN's Lauren Fox is on Capitol Hill. Elena Treen is at the White House. Elena, what is the White House saying about this?
Yeah, well, in relation to this new exclusive reporting from Andrew Kaczynski and M. Steck, we do know that Andrew, and I spoke with him about this, called up President Donald Trump yesterday to walk through some of these photos that they had uncovered. Again, and you mentioned this, a lot of these photos and the footage of both Trump, then just a civilian, and Jeffrey Epstein were more than a decade before he began to face allegations, Jeffrey Epstein, of sex trafficking and abuse of minors. But I want to tell you what that phone call was like. So Andrew said that he called Donald Trump and the president told him, "You've got to be kidding me," before repeatedly referring to CNN as fake news and hanging up. So it was a very brief phone call. But then we also got this statement from White House Communications Director Stephen Chung that I'm going to read for you. He said, quote, "These are nothing more than out of context frame grabs of innocuous videos and pictures of widely attended events to disgustingly infer something nefarious. The fact is that the president kicked him out of his club for being a creep. There is nothing more than a continuation of the fake news stories concocted by the Democrats and the liberal media." Now, Kate, the relationship and the friendship between Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein is well known. That has been documented. But I do think these photos and these new photos that both Andrew and M have uncovered for CNN really do fill in the blanks of some more details of their relationship. There hasn't been many videos of them together, but you can see in these photos that they were close. They were at that fashion show in 1993 where you could see, 1999, a Victoria's Secret fashion show. You can see them huddled together, chatting. They were also leaning over and talking to each other while they were seated for the show. Melania Trump, now of course the First Lady, was also there. And I think the reason that these are so important is because so many questions right now are about why the Trump administration is not doing what many of officials who are in the highest levels of the government here in this White House had been saying before they even took office, which was, that they believed the Epstein files needed to be published, that there was more to be uncovered. And so many people are questioning now why that isn't happening and really criticizing the administration's handling of this. And even some of the president's fiercest supporters, people like Laura Loomer, who I talked to yesterday, they're saying that the actions that both this administration and specifically the Justice Department are taking to kind of, try and quell some of the dissatisfaction over their handling of it isn't enough. So this isn't going away. We'll see whether or not we hear more from the president and the White House on this today. Kate.
Absolutely, Elena. Now, let me bring in Lauren Fox on this now, because the drumbeat is really coming from Capitol Hill. The demand for more information from lawmakers on both sides of the aisle, and a growing number of Republicans saying that more needs to be released and known. But where do things stand with that, given that the House Speaker said nothing until September? What are you hearing today?
Yeah, Kate, and that drumbeat is really also coming from the constituents that they are hearing from phone calls and messages that they are getting from Republican voters who feel like they want more information. I think a lot of Republicans are feeling that pressure, and they're feeling caught in between Donald Trump, who they're very loyal to, and the fact that their voters expect more. There were several really key developments yesterday. The House Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer said that he does plan to subpoena Ghislaine Maxwell for a deposition in the next several days. He says that it may take time to play out and negotiate exactly how that deposition will unfold, but he laid out that he plans to go to the federal prison and interview her, and then at some point thereafter release the public transcript. But that does not mean that Republicans don't want further information being.
Joining us now, Democratic Senator Chris Coons of Delaware. He serves on both the Foreign Relations and Judiciary Committees. Good morning, Senator. Always good to talk to you. We have plenty of ground to cover with you, but let's start with the Epstein matter. And first, get your thought about the potential appropriateness. You sit on the Judiciary Committee. The potential appropriateness of the Deputy Attorney General going to visit Ghislaine Maxwell in prison.
Look, there needs to be transparency and accountability here for the handling of the Epstein files under President Trump. If a representative, a senior representative from the Department of Justice goes to conduct an interview, it's got to be done in a transparent way. I think having her testify in front of Congress would make good sense. I think releasing transcripts makes good sense. I think releasing the client documents that President Trump promised and that Attorney General Bondi said she was reviewing makes sense. Frankly, this is yet another promise made, promise not kept by President Trump. He promised to bring prices down. He hasn't. He promised to end the war in Ukraine on day one. He hasn't. He promised to release the Epstein files. He hasn't. I think we need transparency.
So on that note, Senator, first of all, as we just mentioned, the Speaker is sending the House home so they don't have to deal with the Epstein.
That's a stunning development for him to literally send the entire House of Representatives home for their month-long vacation early just to avoid a floor vote on releasing the Epstein files.
The upper chamber, though, still in business. But on this, in terms of this, your call for transparency, other Democrats done the same. Obviously, there was just a Democratic president, President Biden, for 4 years. It was his Department of Justice. Should Democrats have released this material when they were in power?
Look, it was President Trump and a lot of folks in his circle who made this a central issue of the campaign, his intention to promptly release the files. I think this should have been made public long ago, but it was literally President Trump who made it a centerpiece of his campaign that he's now dodging and changing and throwing out chaff and accusing everybody else of having done anything else. Suggests there's a there. I'm not generally someone who favors conspiracy theories or indulges in them, but this is pretty striking, the extent to which they're avoiding releasing this information.
And on that note, some have made the connection to the president's hopes to change the subject, to talk about something else, with this idea of deflection, where yesterday he suddenly brought back a lot of the 2016 Russiagate conspiracies, which some sort of laughed off, but there was a serious suggestion at the heart of it, where he said that former President Obama committed treason. One of the more serious crimes we have here, and the President Trump said, whether it's right or wrong, it's time to go after people.
That is a chilling quote from a sitting president. And look, President Trump throws out so much stuff. My favorite name for him privately is Donnie Distraction, because he's always doing this. Look over here, look over here, look over here. This isn't just a distraction. That is a grave accusation against a former president, which prompted former President Obama to speak out. And to be clear, a Senate Intelligence Committee report approved by then-Senator Marco Rubio concluded the same, that there was Russian interference in our 2016 election. The distinction DNI Tulsi Gabbard is making is, did the Russians actually get into electoral machinery and change the vote? There isn't evidence that they did. Did they engage in a sustained campaign to influence the American public and to influence the outcome of the election in 2016? There is significant evidence that they did, and a report of the Senate Intelligence Committee confirmed that.
Senator Coons, this is Susan Page. Clearly, the issue of Jeffrey Epstein is problematic for Republicans and for President Trump. I wonder if you also see some risks for Democrats in focusing on the issue of Jeffrey Epstein instead of talking, for instance, about Medicaid cuts or the effect of the big, beautiful bill that was just signed into law?
Look, I do think that one of the most unifying issues we've had in 6 months is President Trump and the Republicans in Congress pushing through on a straight party line vote massive cuts, both to hunger programs that support millions of hungry children and seniors and to Medicaid, which provides health care that'll likely throw 17 million folks off of health care. Both their ending of the tax breaks that make the Affordable Care Act affordable and their cuts to Medicaid that will close rural hospitals and senior nursing facilities. You're right that that is a strong message. As we've learned in the last couple of weeks, most Americans don't know the details of the so-called big, beautiful bill and the ways in which it was an ugly, frankly, tragedy for lots of communities around the country. There's already one senator who's introducing a bill to repeal parts of the bill he just voted for.
What you're seeing is the distraction fail, and it's failing for a few reasons. One, and I do love that line, Donnie distraction, right? Which is what the senator called Trump, at least in some of the reporting we've seen. The distraction is failing for a couple reasons. One, because it's a story that people care about. Now, whether they should care about this story as much as, you know, the cuts to Medicaid and Medicare and, or the, you know, cuts to food stamps and whatnot, and all of these things that have either happened or are likely to happen in the next couple years, I don't think, though, this is as important as those stories, which will affect lives in a more direct sense. But the people care about what the people care about, and right now they really care about this, right? Like, you know, like, the people have agency and autonomy, and people care about it, so it's not just going to go away, even if you try to drop other little nuggets about stories that they either don't care about at all, that are totally irrelevant, or even if they do care, they don't care nearly as much because it's not as immediate. So his conspiracies about a man that hasn't been president in over 10 years now, right? Or it's been about 10 years since he's been president. It's not playing with people, right? And also, the reason the distraction isn't working is because he doesn't rip the Band-Aid off. It's all the will they, won't they. It's the, yeah, I'm going to do it during the election. And he sort of hummed and hawed during the election. You guys remember that, right? He was like, yeah, I'm definitely going to release some stuff. You know, the Epstein stuff, I'll do it, but, you know, maybe I'll be a little bit. And he was kind of like trying to waffle, but he basically said he would do it. And then, once it got elected, he kept saying he would do it, and then his AG said she would do it, and she had the files, and they were going to drop a bomb, and then he brought in all the right-wing influencers who collectively have millions and millions of followers between them, and they did this big press event, and they gave them the binders, and they said, oh, in these binders, there's lots of stuff, and it turns out the binders were basically empty of any meaningful info, but it got people excited still, and then all of a sudden, they're like, no, we're not going to do it. And so that, combined with the fact that every day, drip, 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 different news sources dropping different pieces of evidence, both new and historic, means this will not die.